Hi, you're watching Dog Ear Musings. I'm Monica. Today we're going to be doing a book review on the book Milk, Blood, Heat by Dantiel W. Moniz. This book was nominated by Time magazine as one of the 100 must-read books to read of 2021. Originally from Florida, but Moniz currently teaches at UW-Madison, where she's a teaching assistant for creative writing. There were lots of things that drew me into reading this book, as well as the bright colors and the really cool cover with the citrus fruit on it. This book was sitting at my local bookstore, kind of like candy bars, when you're making an impulse purchase after doing a Trader Joe's haul. I currently study at UW-Madison, and I also was born and raised in Florida. So I was really excited to read this book because all of these short stories are around Florida and set in Florida. So I was really excited to read this book because of the space aspect of this book. This book is a compilation of short stories. All are set in Florida, in different cities. The setting of Florida kind of takes a really front seat of this book. It grapples with themes of morality, as well as motherhood and relationships. It's all contemporary stories. I would classify it as realistic contemporary, but they're all kind of linked together through kind of a poetic voice. A lot of her writing uses kind of lyricism to kind of create a strong narrative and point of place. First story was this crazy one about these two friends, and I won't really spoil what happens, but there's a moment where these two friends kind of go through this experience, and then the other friend is kind of left with having to think about how that moment shaped her as a person. There's another story where this young mother loses her baby and is seeing images of this baby everywhere in her day-to-day life, and she has to think about her current relationship and reflecting on that. There's a lot of really poignant imagery in these stories, but they all kind of reflect on the same sort of message, which is what links these stories all together, that idea of like moral ambiguity. One thing that I would advise readers of this book, and something that I wish that I had done differently when reading this book, was I read it all in one sitting. And with short story collections, sometimes you can do that, but in other short story collections, a lot of times stories can kind of blend together, and then you lose the kind of separateness of each story. That's something that I wish that I had done differently with this book, was like really sit and give each story the time that it deserved. But with that being said, another thing that I kind of took me out of the story a little bit was I left each story wanting a little bit more. I wanted to know a little bit more of the character or the setting or like what happened next. Which, I mean, I think that you could take that as a good problem to have, because I think as a writer, you want your audience to want more. There's actually a comment that I was reading by Roxanne Gay, who also reviewed this book on Goodreads, where she said that there's a confidence in an author for being able to like cap off a story as is, which she complimented Moniz on doing. While I really did want more, you could also see that as kind of a benefit. Kind of like in those job interviews when they ask you, what's my greatest weakness? And then you have to kind of flip it on its head and it's actually your strength. So there's lots of things that I liked about this book. I mean, there's a reason why Time nominated it as one of the 100 must-read books of 2021, and why she has a lot of accolades as a writer. One thing was just from a personal perspective, getting to read stories set in Florida. I feel like I haven't really gotten to read a lot of books set in that location. If you know of any like contemporary adult fiction set in Florida, you can feel free and leave a comment in the comment box below. But when I think about books set in Florida, I usually think about kidlit. Like I think about Because of Winn-Dixie, or I think about any like Carl Hessen, I think his last name is, or Hess. He does Hoot, as well as a bunch of like environmental like kid books where like they have to swoop in and save the day. Both really awesome books and set in Florida. But it was really nice to read a book that is for and about adults that is set in Florida as well. And you can really feel that. If you can classify a book as feeling sticky and kind of like humid as writing, that's how I felt when reading these books. Like you feel like you're in Florida. And that was a thing that I really liked about this book. I also really loved Moniz's poetic language. There were some lines in the book that really stuck with me just because of her vivid imagery, as well as just like the way that she's able to string words and ideas together. Another thing that I really liked about her writing was just like the ideas and the premises of her stories. While I was wanting more from each one, each story was kind of a new idea and a new character that I was excited to learn more about and be a part of their world for that brief moment. So I recommend this book for anyone who really is wanting to get into reading short story collections. I know that for some people there is kind of like a drawback to short stories, kind of like what I was talking about. It's really easy to kind of mush all of these stories together into one kind of lump. For some people, short stories are kind of, it's like that same idea as poetry, where you don't want to read them because you just want to get through a book like a novel. But if you're someone who's wanting to kind of diversify your reading and looking for a really good short story collection, I'd pick up this book. If you're somebody who really likes reading a book based on the poetic use of language, I would also recommend to read this book as well. So you've been watching my review of Dantiel W. Moniz's book, Milk, Blood, Heat. This is Dog-Eared Musings. Feel free to like and subscribe.